Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, D-Gens and D-Genettes, to another episode of the Alfalfa Podcast. We are four radically moderate entrepreneurs and investors swimming in the messy gray ocean, serving up alpha in money, politics, and life. We are Nick Urbani, Steven, the personality, Cesaro, Eric Johansson, and I am Armand Asadi. All links at alfalfapod.com. Make sure to hit subscribe. We love you. We appreciate you. Follow along wherever you're listening, and hit us up on the socials. And last but not least, dive into our Discord where Steven was just nicknamed the personality. A lot of fun stuff happening in there in the after party. Cheers, boys. Really excited for this episode.
Salud.
Salud.
Salud. All right. On the agenda today for investing, we have a market update. There's a lot going on. I'll save it for the update. Policy, we're talking about the new Stimmy checks in California and whether or not this is a good strategy. And for the life segment, deep fake. We're going to get weird. Let's do this. Eric, do you want to kind of give us the market overview here?
Alfalfa Round
excuse me. I'm getting ahead of myself. Yes, Alfalfa Round. All right, go for it, Nick.
Okay, I had a bunch of random things that happened. One of my old NFT projects, the Began Punks, just all of a sudden just took a ride and started.
Have they been mooning?
They're mooning?
I'm holding.
They did. They're
still holding.
Extreme volume, and I randomly had 3 left over in a wallet, and thank God Carne Asada Chris alerted me.
What, you dump now?
Oh, absolutely, of course.
You held for 2 years, and now you're going to dump on this pump?
Absolutely. I was like, thank you. You can have that.
Wait, just out of curiosity, what'd you liquidate those for?
0.35 to 0.5.
Oh, we're going to the moon, baby.
0.5.
It is garbage.
We're going to the moon.
Wow. I got like 30 of those things.
Give me my ETH back.
Can I tell you that I sold one of those for 7 ETH?
You top ticked that bad boy.
Wow.
Weird.
That's impressive.
Anyway.
The B-Gan Punks.
So,
the bastard Gan Punks.
Bastard
right?
Gan Punks.
First
Which
NFT I've ever minted.
I
forget-
still like that project.
I forget what
still
GAN
like
stands
those.
for,
So do I.
but that technology is part of like deep fake technology.
We're going to
so-
get into that later.
Nice tie-in.
Yeah, we'll tie it in later.
Beautiful.
I don't know if this is Alfalfa, but I did find an artist that I've always liked. His name is David Cho. He had a mint today, so I bought it. It was like, I don't know, 0.2 ETH, a couple $100. His prints go for like $2,500. I'm not saying this is like a number go up NFT, but I just bought it as like a personal art collection choice. And then I was researching GMX. I saw there's 11% yield in ETH. If you're a token holder that I believe stakes, you get something like 30% of the transaction fees. So it's just nice to see another protocol actually pay out in ETH.
Some real DeFi yield, maybe?
Yeah, I'm not buying it.
Do you trade on that platform?
No, but I thought about switching from DYDX just because of the yield opportunities there and see if, and also if DYDX pulls off of ETH in 6 months.
Well, I mean, DYDX gives you some nice reward. Like, I get a lot of
tokens,
trading.
yeah.
Like, every time I turn around, they're like, here's $900.
Do you have to claim those? Because I've never actually claimed them.
Yeah,
Like,
you have to claim them.
Do they expire? Damn, I should probably claim them.
I don't know if they expire, but you should definitely.
It's gasless, so I mean,
Okay.
I don't know. DYDX a couple bucks is the token.
No, it costs. You have to claim them on mainnet. So
Okay.
but
So anyway, just researching that. Going to keep my eye on it, and then stacking cash. I think we're going to see 3-digit ETH here soon. Risk is definitely to the downside, so just watching and waiting.
Okay. I think with the theme of stacking cash, I'm like pretty nervous about the macro picture, which we'll probably get into in our money segment. But like, I'm sort of getting out of the shorts, selling puts against ETH. I need to get back into ETH, right? So that's my long-term game. Get back into ETH. We're going to see 3-digit ETH again, I'm pretty sure. How do you play that? Like how I'm playing it is just selling puts. And, it's to the point, like I'll have low strikes where I will probably lose some of these contracts and be happy because I'm just like buying a dip and getting paid a bit of a premium. So I was selling the July monthly strike, end of July. And that was like a 1 month, 5% yield I was getting like paid in premium. And, annualized, that's pretty solid.
Yeah. What's a strike?
750 put.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
for 1 month.
Yeah, for 1 month. So annualized, pretty good return. And like if I buy at 750, happy either way, So that's the way I'm doing it. I think the way that goes wrong is if ETH doesn't go down to 750 and then like I never get my ETH back, I never like buy ETH, that's a problem. But that's the way I'm playing it.
Worst case, you FOMO back in at 1,200 though.
Exactly. Like I think we'll have a long accumulation period regardless.
I hope.
Yeah, I'm pretty long right now. I'm not sure why I'm long.
I was gonna say, are you sure you want to be long right now?
I'm really long right now, not because I really feel good about price going up, because I just really feel like I know when I'm wrong. And when I'm wrong, I don't feel like I lose a lot. And I do think there's like a non-zero chance that ETH just rips to like 1,700 for like a month or two. I think people have really... I'm also just like, I'm just so contrarian by nature, you know? I had a lot of fun being like a huge grizzly bear for a while. Now everybody's bearish, and I almost am just like, well, I'm going to screw you.
That's
I'm
what's
going
happening.
to go long. But I'm like, do I really want to be long? I don't know. This isn't a good alfalfa segment for me because I'm just...
I just want to go back to the last episode and ask your therapist on why you have to counter everyone. Like, there's something there.
I mean, to your point, though, I have started looking at yields again. I'm kind of interested in this. Have you guys seen the Umami Finance on Arbitrum?
Heard about it, but haven't dug into it.
Same.
Yeah, I've been digging into it a little more. It's interesting. They're actually like incorporated in the U.S. They got one of these kind of dual kind of DYDX Uniswap style things where the DAO is not part of them, but there's like a corporation. It makes me feel like a little bit safe. They haven't launched a vault yet, but it's supposed to be a vault that basically it pays you in ETH, right? Like the new DeFi, I think, is going to be, can we create products that pay you in like actual yield? Like they don't just like inflate a token and pay it to you, and it's just this weird Ponzi shell game. I think the first vault they're launching does some interesting stuff with GMX and TracerDAO, both on Arbitrum. I think the principle behind it is that it invests in the GLP pool, which pays like a really healthy yield, and it comes from like real place, like trading fees,
Right.
and also traders losing, which they do, right?
Yep.
And then they use TracerDAO to hedge, but TracerDAO itself like is paying you money to just use it, right? So you're going to get a yield
That's
from the
skewed.
GLP, and then the hedge itself is going to yield because you're getting paid to just use.
But that's
like
when you're taking the least popular side of the trade, right?
when you take anything on TracerDAO, I think you can farm, right? If you buy 3S ETH or 3L ETH or whatever, like I think Tracer is paying like you rewards in Tracer to do that. So it's kind of this like interesting thing where you're sort of taking a delta neutral position in GMX, which is as you said, this like nice perp exchange on Arbitrum, and then you're getting paid to hedge it out. And I saw them quoting like 30-40% yields in the Discord. They were speculating on it. The yields always collapse, so I never hang my hat on it. But I think it's interesting. I'm starting to kind of get optimistic again on the DeFi stuff because it got really. It was just so demoralizing for a while, right? Everything just started getting really sketchy and scammy. The yield wasn't worth it. You just wanted to like pull all your coins out, just hold them in a wallet, and just go away for a bit. Yep. So it feels good to be coming back. I was going to start getting into the Arbitrum Odyssey. Is that what it's called? Arbitrum Odyssey?
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay. I for a second I thought I just said the wrong word and I felt really dumb. But they paused it today, I think. So.
Oh, this is when like the marketing guy at that company's just like, guys, are you kidding me? Like the one big marketing push.
guys wanna
that
see what
You
day
had
it
one
is?
job.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's the 29th.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the 29th today.
Anyway, that's my week in short.
Okay.
So I had a really interesting week. It started with doing the work of revisiting my thesis, and I remember I texted you guys from the I think my layover because I get on these flights, I never get internet, and I think that the most creative time I ever have in my life is on airplanes, and like. As I'm even writing like my book, like I intend to spend more time on airplanes just to be able to do that, to get that done. Funny enough, there's an incredible author you guys probably know, Simon Sinek, the TED speaker, who writes the majority of his books on airplanes.
I feel like trains is the bigger unlock. Just take a long train ride.
Is he the start with Y guy?
Oh yeah, that's like what 15 years old at this point.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember listening to that.
He's
being
still
like,
thriving off that. His whole brand is called Start With Why still. Yeah, the meme. So it was incredible. And when I revisited that thesis, I realized that I'm going to do like a quarterly revamp. Whereas I think the last time I really had taken a good, solid look at it was over 2 years ago. And I overhauled everything. to the point where I got specific about every segment of my portfolio and what I want to do within every segment. Not just allocations, but like what constitutes like a good investment for me in NFTs. And so one of the decisions that came out of that was, it's funny because like I wasn't here for the last episode, right?
We noticed.
You guys did. I did. And I listened to it as a listener. And first of all, I really enjoyed it. And
Thanks, man.
yeah, number one fan. And what I actually took away from the punks conversation is really interesting. So I've been like putting on this more for the spirit of the conversation. I think you've always known that is like, I'm the mutant ape guy and a couple of you other punks guys, and Steven's also been like ready to get back and get in the game with the punk. And
I am in the game.
And now you are in the game.
Right.
And deep down, like I've always believed like punks are superior in many ways. I am worried about the future of CryptoPunks, given that they're now owned by Yuga Labs, but I prefer the culture. I don't like the Bored Ape culture as much. I think there's a lot to have, but for example, at Ape Fest, I was told like in great detail that when you went to Ape Fest and you went to go buy merch, going and buying like Bored Ape merch was like walking into an Apple store. It was an experience. People were clapping for you. It was a whole charade. Whereas punks don't have any of that. And anyway, what I'm trying to say is I listened to that episode from the outside. Actually, your guys' conversation was something that gave me the push that I had already, the internal struggle I was having deep down to list my mutant was like, okay.
Oh, so it's listed.
Yeah.
It's being sold.
Yeah.
That's a pretty
he's
cool
gonna do it.
conversation we had then, I
He's
guess.
gonna buy
It was a very
Luxor.
cool conversation, and I
I mean,
enjoyed
we're
it
biased.
as a listener.
We're all biased, obviously.
I am definitely,
Yeah.
I
Super
definitely have
biased.
bag bias now.
Of course.
I think punks are just going to the moon.
Well, I don't think that I have no idea what it's going to look like in the long run, but I do know that like that was one reason. And then this was 4 episodes ago when I was in like wherever I was in Greece and I was in another country and I woke up to do the metaverse land sale for Yuga Labs and I was like really disheartened by that whole thing. That was like the big strike for me, was like watching the way the Yuga Labs founders played that. I'm sure they're awesome people and we should talk to them for sure. But like, I just didn't like the way that was executed. And that showed me something about the way the community was being treated. And I have all these different examples where I was like, yeah, I would prefer to have a punk. So
Well, it's a lot easier to compare punks versus apes and like compare those two cultures than to like say in absolute terms, punks are going up in price, like, so I think that's a fair point.
yeah. So that was very big. And, we were texting about this and kind of talking portfolio structure and how perhaps it would have been prudent to move to cash a little bit more quickly. And so I've really taken that more seriously.
If only you
And,
had 3 people telling you every week.
3 people?
Wait, look at me.
2.
You guys have mocked me for being a beer, a beer, a bear forever.
Yeah. I think Nick and I both were like playing it similarly.
Well, like,
right?
I think it's different when you have the majority of your investable capital in crypto. You probably more likely to pull it into cash when you think things are going down.
Yep.
But if it's a smaller percentage, I think you're okay saying, I'll ride it all the way through.
Yeah,
So
that's
granted,
true.
would I be richer today if I would have, pulled it in cash and just, yeah, for sure. But when
Totally.
it's a smaller percentage, it feels okay. It feels comfortable. It's not like a freak out moment for not.
Especially
pulling out
when
cash.
you have the identity, which can be, it's not always a positive thing to have this identity of like I am a hodler or I am a trader.
True.
And so when you have that identity that I've been working through of like I am a hodler, especially from the world that I came from, which was just like investing in Vanguard index funds, and then all of a sudden moving to crypto and being like apply the same methodology,
Right.
which you and I have talked about many, many, many times.
Yeah.
And even you've said that it's not something that you do moving to cash. It was just a
Absolutely.
very small amount of your bag. So I was not ready to just like take a significant portion of my ETH and Bitcoin bag and move it to cash. But looking back, do I wish I had done that more? Yeah. And so I've started to do that. Started DCA my way back in, and yeah, just looking for triple digit ETH again to really back up the truck. So that was my week.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, on to markets.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the market conversation today, what we thought we would do, like normally we like dissect some silo of investing or money as a topic, and what we thought today is just like let's think of it holistically. What are we seeing in markets? And I think that's what we want to talk about. So today is Wednesday, June 29th. Bitcoin's at 20K and ETH's at 1100.
19,993 now. It's all over.
Okay, Mr. Personality. All
I
right,
got the
tone it down.
I got the chart right here. I'm just glued to it in real time.
You know, a lot has gone on in markets, but I think like we're all very cognizant of the fact that macro is driving this whole truck or boat or whatever you want to say. Macro is driving the whole thing. So I think this conversation is probably going to start with macro, and like what I am taking out of it is I revisited that Stan Druckenmiller conversation from the Sohn conference 2 weeks ago, and a couple things that I want to point out is like, man, this sometimes it's great to just like mimic the best in the game. Stan is probably one of the top 3 guys in this entire game, and he's been sort of just like right his whole career, kind of. But one thing that stood out to me, he's like, never invest for what you're seeing right now. Like, don't invest for today. Picture a world 12 to 18 months from now. Like, envision what the world's going to look like in 18 months, and picture what security prices look like in that world that you're creating. And I think like these conversations are helpful to like help us create that future vision of what it's going to be in 18 months. So I started doing that. I started doing that personally. Like I wrote it down, and like I broke macro down into like all these different categories: inflation, federal, like monetary policy, fiscal policy, et cetera, et cetera. And I haven't like formulated fully what that looks like, but I think this is a path that I feel comfortable with, kind of like how you're building out your portfolio thesis. Like I'm building out this like macro thesis and trying to envision a world 18 months from now, and like what do security prices look like in this world. And you know, we've had like good discourse today in our like money section of our Discord channel, and you know, like Rizzy's giving out great stuff, like Steven's adding in, like a lot of people are adding in. And what I'm thinking is like, there's never been a harder time to allocate money in my entire life than right now. And I don't know, it seems like everyone's kind of feeling that, right?
Yeah.
Because like so many things could lead it one direction or another. How I land right now is that like bearish thesis is still in play, but that doesn't mean that we can't have some like rapid and dramatic melt up somewhere along the line. And that's sort of where I'm picturing this thing going in the near term. And it's like, to Steven's point, he's long right now, just I think because we've had like 12 straight weekly red candles, maybe 13 straight weekly red candles. And it's like, at some point it has to bounce, reverse, something has to happen. And what I'm seeing is that in 2 weeks, July 13th, they're coming out with like the CPI print. Earnings are coming out on companies in TradFi. These could be catalysts to surprise with good news, and we haven't had good news in 6 months. I think all it takes is like one piece of good news to send this thing in a different
you said
direction.
that the other day, I was like, you're totally right.
So that's how I'm going to frame up this like money conversation. But whoever wants to go.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on the this is the hardest time to invest. Obviously, in our lifetimes, they haven't been that long, but even beyond that, I've seen a lot of people who are very experienced investors going, I don't know what the hell to do right now. It was pretty obvious to people who were sort of in the know at the end of last year, right? Like a lot of big guys, a lot of the drucks of the world were saying like, this is stupid. There's going to be this Fed push to kind of pull liquidity out of the system. If you're in risk assets, you're going to get hurt. And the risk reward was really good if you sold your ETH in the 4,000s, and that thing could go down to $400. But now it's like, totally, ETH could lose 50%. It could, but 50% on the downside if you're shorting versus this is the bottom and ETH goes to 10K or something, and you just get your face ripped off, and now you have no ETH and you're broke. Like it just doesn't look super attractive to short. 12 weeks in the red, everything down, everybody's bearish. At the same time, it feels bad to buy things. So it's like, what do you do? So I feel like what you said with the Stan quote, look 12 to 18 months and think about it. That's what I've started doing. I do feel like 18 months from now, like $1,000 ETH could be something you look back on and be like, wow, that was really obvious, huh? That's pretty obvious. Why didn't we buy 1,000? It's kind of how it feels. That's how I felt during COVID, right? When Bitcoin crashed to 3K. But I remember being in that moment and being afraid. I was like, it's gonna go under 1,000.
Yeah,
It's
you
over.
could say like, oh, we have 50% downside from here. Like you can obviously like draw that narrative out as well.
So I've felt this feeling before and been wrong. Like basically every time. I was wrong during COVID. I was wrong during the crash of 2018. I was wrong during the 2009 like re-crash. Remember when we came out of the financial crisis and we started crashing again, and people were like, "Oh, this is dead cat bounce, you idiots! The whole system's going to zero." And then that ended up kicking off just like a decade and a half of up only, and I wasn't in the stock market. Like I
It was
got
like
out
February, March of 2009.
Yeah,
Or
like
yeah.
I got out before the crash, preserved all my capital, and then made almost nothing on the way back up. It was a huge mistake because I got caught up in the fear porn. And yeah, it might be different now. Some things are different now. It's really tough to parse this stuff for sure. But I don't know anything to do other than to look like way in the future, and then like also simultaneously like 1 to 2 months ahead. So I've kind of like bifurcated my portfolio into like a long-term thing, and like I obviously actively trade. So like I'm looking at like income generation on this like 1 to 2 month thing. When I look at crypto and Bitcoin and like when I look at all this stuff, like I do think the risk reward is pretty good here in the short run. Like, sure, I could be wrong. Yeah, we could just nuke even more, even though it's like insane. Of course, that's possible. But I also feel like 20K Bitcoin, there's a lot of buying happening here. If you're wrong, like it's kind of obvious where you're wrong. You're not going to lose a lot on the downside if you know how to manage risk. And then I think the upside's pretty good here. And if people aren't active managers, which I know most people are not, then if you have a long-term view, like these are good prices, right?
Right.
They are.
Well, I mean, I kind of want to fit Eric's analysis into a question I have. So what I've been looking at is like interest rates, increasing interest rates, affect discounted cash flow models, right? And that affects the PE multiples, right? So we've seen multiple compression, obviously, because we know interest rates are going up. The next question I have is like, well, if we go into recession, are we going to see the actual earnings part of that formula go down? So we've seen this pullback because of multiples going down. Are we going to see an even further pullback because we go in recession? And let's look at a few examples, like Facebook, for example. They've pulled back because interest rates are higher, discounted cash flows, more expensive. But maybe because we go into recession, just people spend less on advertising. So do you see that as like a potential next leg down? Because to me, that seems like the next step. And I remember 2007, 2008, 2007 was like, okay, we went down. And then 2008 was the real recession and things went down even further.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you referring just to stocks, or are you talking about crypto?
Just
too?
stocks,
Just
right?
stocks.
Yeah,
right?
just stocks. And then we
Okay.
can talk about, like, is crypto going to lead that?
Yeah, because I think that's an interesting
Right.
thing to ask.
Yeah, so I think with stocks, like my base case thesis is that does play out, but it might play out over a longer period of time, and it doesn't necessarily go there direct. Price doesn't go there directly necessarily. And I think what I'm saying is that in the near term, you could see some response, some bounce in the market just on like a piece of good news that has nothing really to do with the earnings that you're describing. Like if there's a low CPI, like we've seen commodities pull back dramatically. We've seen like a lot of prices sort of like decelerate in their inflation already. So like if CPI comes out low on the 13th of July, like maybe that is a catalyst to like send the market back in the near term before like earnings really starts to like hit the stocks. Like
So
you're saying.
is that a bear market rally, or is that us potentially leading us out of this?
No, it's a scam pump that you want to short.
All right. I'm glad I asked. So the other question I have before we get into like, is crypto going to lead that is, I've been learning more about volatility and its role in some of these like crashes or declines. And it seems like volatility, in order for the crash to kind of, or the decrease to kind of fully live its life out, volatility has to increase. Specifically, the VIX goes over something like 40, and we haven't seen that. And I know we're getting a little technical, but I just have this like nagging question of like, do we need to see that in order to say, okay, we got out the capitulation part? We've had this like orderly decline of decreasing stock markets, but I don't know if I've had the Uber driver or my mom or anyone else be like, oh my God, did you see what happened in the stock market where we have actual panic? And so my next question is, do we need to see that live out to feel like, okay, we're on the other side of this?
It almost feels too easy if that happens.
Like it's
right?
almost too formulaic.
Yeah, doesn't it? Like the markets almost feel like cruel lately. Like they don't want to give you easy plays. They don't want to give you, oh, there's the capitulation candle, and now I just buy back in with all my worth, like Arthur said. You know, it's like I also, but on the other hand, there's the other voice on my shoulder being like, this time isn't different, right? Because I remember thinking this in the past. Like this happened a lot during the last crypto bull run, where I had these principles, and I was like, when these things happen, it's not different. You're going to get out. Mostly it's about getting out, right? But still, in the moment, in spite of my prior self-prep, I was like, well, actually, I don't know. Maybe it is a super cycle. Maybe it is like, maybe this, and it wasn't. Like none of it was. It was all the same. If I just followed all of the original plans, I'd be better off than I am now. So although I want to do like the kind of like fancy thing and be like, oh, maybe there's not going to be a capitulation. Maybe there's not because everybody wants it. I kind of feel like that will probably still happen. I think.
Yeah.
So now it won't because I just said that.
Well,
So
how do you
you're
feel
welcome,
about
Mr.
like?
Judy.
Go ahead if you want to go. I was just gonna say that like Armand, you and I have talked in the past about like Ray Dalio's all-weather portfolio, and in the Discord we were talking about something called the cockroach portfolio, which is very similar. And it's like, man, don't you just think that strategy wins over a long period of time? Like right now, you would have been like, fuck, it would have been so nice to be like 25% gold, 25% cash. Mm-hmm. You would be ignoring this entire thing. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we sit here and, discuss and kill ourselves, bang our heads against the wall, trying to like time this shit. And it's like, man, this is actually just stupid. Like,
that's like the kind of Chris Cole Dragon portfolio?
Yes,
What is
yeah.
it like? It's like 20% cash, 20% commodities, 20% real estate, 20%
so that's like
bonds,
gold.
20% stock, or something. It's
yeah,
something
so
like
like
that.
defensive side is all those things you mentioned, and on the offensive side, you could go with like stock, tech shit, or whatever. And like you kind of like are protected against every market environment. You participate in the upside, and I'm like, we do this professionally, so we have to like think about it all the time. But I'm just thinking like, fuck, this is sort of the TLDR.
I do think that portfolio, whether you want to call it the Dragon portfolio, or there's people who have like different versions of it, but I do feel like for the average passive investor, I think that is the play for the next 10, maybe 20 years, right? I think the era of just like investing in index S&P and like some bonds, like I think that could go away. Like this is a rough time to be investing. I think you either have to be really good at trend following, or you have to have this like broad expansion, like outside of these asset classes that you're normally thinking about. And if I had income outside of investing, which unfortunately I don't, that's what I would do. I would go to that portfolio. I might maybe like strategically expand the crypto element a little bit, but I would just do that and just go outside and touch some grass.
Yes,
Because I don't think there's anything else you can do right now. It's just a rough time.
We could ask the Discord if someone will give you a job if you're really needing something outside of investing income.
Please.
Someone give Steven a job.
Please help. Well, I'm actually curious, like Armand, your perspective on this as a because I'm doing the Druckenmiller, like I'm in cash, or like 130% of my net worth is in like Ethereum type thing, but that's a terrible strategy for everybody else on the planet, basically. And you seem like my idea of like a sane person who has like diversified income and is trying to make like long-term balanced decisions. Like, how are you feeling about the current environment? Like, what do you want to do, and what are some of your things you're wrestling with?
It's really challenging. I come from a world where I read books like The Simple Path to Wealth. I think that's what it's called, J.L. Collins. Mm-hmm. And it is a 12-chapter book that is literally trying to sell you on the idea of putting all of your money in a Vanguard index fund and going to sleep happy. And then I read books like Psychology of Money. And it argues over, again, a series of like 12 chapters that you can't beat, you can't actively beat the market, essentially. Like, sit back, play the all-weather portfolio, the Dragon portfolio, and live your life. The challenge I have is that I'm in this world. I'm exposed to it. I'm always in the conversation. So if you're going to dedicate a certain amount of time to investing, but you're not going to think and identify of yourself as a trader, how do you balance those two acts? That's the challenging part. You're constantly hearing what Steven did, what Eric did, what the world is doing, and yet you're trying to tell yourself, like, I'm not going to sit around and be an active trader, and I know I probably should have moved to cash to a certain degree. How do I manage that? And I think that the balance or the algorithm comes down to something around the amount of time you're actually investing corresponding to making decisions with the right amount of, it's so hard to like parse through this, but it's like, that's what I wrote about for like 12 pages on a flight, where I had to sit down and say, I need to revisit this every quarter based on the amount of time I've been putting in. And that's how active I should be, is essentially the answer. So it's like, if I've been pretty inactive, then I need to put myself in a position where I can sit back and watch this burn and crash and drop 90%. But what percentage of my portfolio is that going to be? So like what it looks like for me is that, to me, stocks and crypto look pretty much the same. I'm still in stocks to a certain degree because I like a few of the companies that I'm invested in. Mm-hmm. I just like them. Like I like the feeling of owning them the way you like the feeling of like owning the CryptoPunk, right?
No, you don't.
I think I do. I think I do. No, arguably no, because I don't have Tesla as my profile picture.
No.
So yeah, it's not the same. But I love the company and I love the idea of owning a piece of that company. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same idea. So like to me, the volatility that exists in the stock market, the risk aspect of stocks and just like participating in the economy and that side of things is the same as just being involved in crypto. So for me, like I have crypto at 50% of my entire portfolio right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're kind of barbelling like I am. You're
Correct.
like basically cash,
Now,
Ethereum.
now here's the other thing. I don't own any real estate, zero. And so like my next move, if I can, I wish I could reference the, hello train. I wish I could reference the exact episode, but you know, Nick has been telling us for years about limited partnerships in real estate. Mm-hmm. And for me, I feel like, what the hell's going on with that thing? Mm-hmm. I feel like in the next 18 months, a move for me would be to put at least 10% toward real estate. And so I have like allocations written out and things like that. But one of the decisions, one of the changes I'm going to make is absolutely barbell, not just cash, but I need a certain amount in real estate. I mean, not necessarily in a primary residence. I wouldn't view that as like an investment personally. We should do that as an episode.
That's actually a good topic.
We should absolutely do that as an episode. For me, a primary residence is like, and this is just a teaser, we can go into it way more later, but like, it's like the ability to customize my living space, and it's an investment in my livelihood and my comfort, not something that I would view. I would of course count it toward my net worth, but I wouldn't view it as like an asset in my
It's not
portfolio.
in your investable portfolio,
Correct,
right?
Correct. So that's where I'm at.
I'm in like a similar boat as you, because like I'm not trying to trade every day. Like I'm trying to create wealth through the businesses I run and create. But I am diversified. I have mostly real estate, or I say like roughly half real estate. There's also equities and crypto. But I do fall into one of the holes that Druckenmiller mentioned. He said, when you're diversified, you have zombie holdings, like something that's 10, 15%. It's not, your biggest holding, and you don't really like follow it as much as you should. And it just becomes a zombie holding that like maybe you forget to like sell, or you forget to layer on more and size up. And I have a few of those, and I've seen it kind of bite my overall portfolio return. And so that's been a little troubling. On the note of real estate,
I think it's important to point out, these guys are investors. Like you and I were talking about this. Like, we should clarify this at one point. These guys are investors.
Right.
We're business owners, entrepreneurs, operators. It's a very different world and a very different amount of time you have to dedicate to this stuff.
But it's a good mix, I think.
For us, it's awesome. But I just mean as a listener, you have to also keep that in mind. Like the person that's speaking and where you're at in your life is a very important decision. It's like, if you can't replicate what Steven is doing, it's probably because you're not Steven. You're not spending your day thinking about those things, and you don't have his background. You don't have his experience.
Or you don't have
his
a CFA.
education. And exactly. So it's like, when you have that background in TradFi and you become so interested in crypto, of course you can apply that. But it's a very different world.
I just want to make a comment. I have looked at, you mentioned real estate and looking over the next 18 months. So I went back and looked at data during the last recession, and some of the lowest returning deals as a limited partner in excuse me, apartment complexes happened a year before the recession was kind of marked. And then there were zero deals the year during the recession and the year after. But some of the best deals over the last 20 years were I'd say 2 years following the recession. So the next year may not be the best time to kind of like look into apartment complexes in real estate. I don't know. It's a deal by deal basis, but I just want to mention that to you, Armand, because I actually look back at all the historical returns.
I think that sort of thinking applies to almost all asset classes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But yeah.
I think you're right with real estate specifically. Like we have this weird period right now where we just jacked up mortgage rates, potentially going into a recession. So I think it's definitely in the cards that you could see 20, 30% declines in real estate prices. And if you're sitting on cash, like I think this could be one of those quote unquote generational opportunities, because I think you may be able to hop in and buy some stuff, right? And then maybe a year or two down the line, like refi and get your rate cut in half,
right?
And just be sitting like really pretty on a deal.
And like I'm thinking from like the public equity side, I'm thinking like, okay, so maybe housing's held up better than tech stonks, but if it does get ugly, sort of worldwide, then maybe that's an opportunity to take a short instead of going short something that's already down 80%. If something's only down 15, maybe that's an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to segment single family homes versus apartment complexes. And I think like,
absolutely,
single family homes are, we saw I think a 3 sigma or standard deviation move in mortgage rates in such a short period of time, which it rarely happens. So I think it's going to be hard to predict what happens, but I think it's obviously to the downside. So,
but on the multifamily side, you're sitting pretty because rental income is going to remain elevated. Like rents are going higher, like inflation's going higher. You're going to get your income.
Right. And I think if it's harder to afford a single family home, typically the demand for rentals, apartments goes up. Right. Now you have increasing interest rates, which, affects the cap rates and affects like the valuations, which, it all depends on the type of debt that the deal has. If it's variable debt, if it's locked in, if it's interest only, if there's, early buyout like fees, all that plays into effect in terms of like what type of debt you have. But, in 16 days, I get the update on the quarterly earnings for the rent checks, and we'll see.
So what gets wrecked hardest? Like new builds? I was thinking like the builders are going to get probably wrecked.
Well, doesn't it feel like real estate is like the worst thing to buy right now? Like if you had to pick like a worst thing to buy right now, in my head, I think it's actually real estate.
The worst thing.
Because it hasn't experienced a huge drawdown.
I would rather buy
like a little bit
Ethereum right now than buy real estate.
Because you'd rather buy something that's down 75%.
It's gotten it can go lower, but also the upside is pretty. Like real estate, I feel so sketched out. I just see these rates going up. I see people like getting less and less free cash to pay these things. And it's obviously super market dependent. But as like a generalized investor, like I feel like real estate is really the kind of wait and sit on some cash and see if something comes your way type thing. And if you're not investing in crypto, I feel like I'd rather start nibbling on like some Apples or Facebooks or kind of like these blue chippy FANG type things at some point.
What happened, Mr. No Stock?
No, I'm not speaking as myself.
Okay.
I am a
generally.
Yeah.
Are you guys ready for politics?
Almost. I felt that sentiment about real estate in my gut, and then when I looked back at the returns, I was like, okay, for sure, there's no harm in like waiting 12 to 18 months before putting more money back in. Happy to see the deals, but not deploying the capital. I'm just gonna watch and wait for now.
All right, cool. So bottom line, things are really iffy. Nobody knows what's going on. I don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. All of the very smart people in the world who I follow also don't know what's going on. Stan himself is like, I don't want to take a position. Good luck for the next few months. I think like nibble on stuff you like. keep a lot of cash, manage your downside risk. I think
Loving cash.
we might have a long road ahead of us still. We'll just see how it plays out.
Everyone, place your bets. The dice are out. The dice are out. Place your bets.
I mean, we could obviously just riff on this for forever, but I think we can hop on to the next.
Cool.
Good
So,
catch.
Tell me about our future president. Somebody
oh
just
God, just don't start me like that.
Oh,
All right.
He could be the future president.
He could be the future president. So we're talking about California Governor Gavin Newsom has just announced an inflation relief package in the form of stimulus. The total amount, or let's call it direct transfer payments from the state of California directly to citizens. The total amount is $17 billion. And here's
Drop in the bucket.
Here's the tiers, though, and this is where I think this will trigger some folks.
Yeah.
If you make less than 75K, or as a couple you make less than 150K, you get $350. If you make 125K, or your couple is making 250K, you get $250. If you're a couple making $500,000 or less, you get $200. And if you have a kid, you get $350. If you have two kids, you get another $350, and it caps out from there.
$500,000 and a couple tanks of gas.
Yeah, well,
Thanks, buddy.
They're getting hurt at the pump. You know, you got to feed them.
Wait. So you get like 300 per kid?
I think it's so. First of all, the max cap is $1,050,
Yeah.
and I think the calculation there is if you need the lower income tier, you get $350, and then if you have two kids, you get another $700 on top of that, $350 per kid, and you end up at a cap of $1,050.
I don't get it. Like, does every additional kid in your SUV like cut your
Yeah.
gas mileage by like 90%?
Soccer
You need
practice, Steven. Come on, man.
People are gonna be like, Steven's so out of touch. Obviously, if you have
Gotta
three kids, you
go.
spend $700 a month on gas. That's
Gotta
just how it
go
works.
drop the kids at pickleball.
But this isn't like a gas specific thing. It's total
It's
to
just,
like.
it's just a general like, hey, you're on tough times. Here's some cash. Is that like the pitch?
Yeah, I think so. But I'll give you my take right about it's not a pitch against inflation. It's a pitch against the governor has a vote coming up. He's running again for governor in 132 days, November 8th. And guess when those payments start to arrive? Just perfectly in October.
Oh, it's so weird.
Just weeks before the election
we
happens.
call a happy accident.
Right. And there's also this other thing going on where he may be trying to appeal to the further outskirts of the base because he's also concurrently running ads in Florida. And why would a California governor be purchasing ads in Florida
God.
if he
Is he
didn't
really?
play the long game of potentially running in replace of Biden as the Democratic nominee for president? So to me, I started thinking about this. I'm like, why would we introduce stimulus that caused inflation? We can argue about that for a bit, but that caused inflation with the problem that got us here in the first place. And to me, it's a very simple formula of like, the guy sees it as potentially buying votes. Like California has a surplus. I think a lot of that surplus has come from federal emergency relief payments, meaning the federal government pays the state of California because it's in a state of emergency, and that's where most of the surpluses come from. And he saw it in his recall vote, where he got put up for recall to get removed and replaced as governor, and he used an additional $600 stimulus to California citizens. And I think he saw that it kind of worked. Like it kind of got him out of that recall hole. And I think he sees it as an opportunity again. And the reason why I think it's somewhat disingenuous is because for the tiers we talked about, a couple making $500,000, like $200 isn't to serve the people hurt most by inflation. I think if you were going to do that, you would probably like, I don't know, whatever the poverty line is California, you'd probably like cap it at that and just say, let's focus this $17 billion.
Like $100K, man. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the poverty line in California is. It's obviously
Almost
higher than the
poverty in
nation.
California.
It
to be
is.
fair.
Yeah, I mean, it could feel like that. But I think that's why it feels a little disingenuous. And there's several other things he could have done. So anyway, I feel like it was something important to bring up because it's touching on inflation, something that's really big, in the economy.
What's your main gripe here? Do you want to talk about how is this inflationary in a general sense? Is your main gripe the, oh my God, politicians are buying votes and this is going to be a dangerous slippery slope
It's both
into
of those.
what's happening?
That
Like,
is-
what do you want to hit first?
That's
I
like
guess?
the non-surprising part of it. That, oh my God, a politician is acting its own self-interest to get reelected. So I don't think that's as, and we could touch on that, but I don't think that's as surprising. But like
But I think we should cover it.
we should.
Just mention it, that it's just like a fraud. Like, and people fall for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I actually looked at, some of the comments on Twitter when he was announcing this. I'm like, I'm curious where things fall. Obviously, my algorithm's different than everyone else's.
The comments.
I was curious, like, what are people's reactions
Isn't
to
that where
this?
the alpha lives?
Oh God, not in politics.
I mean, we often make
Comment
fun
section.
of politicians for like, they think we're stupid, and they think that the optics is what is going to matter when all we really care about is the outcomes. But this is one of those examples where I'm like, we'll see. We'll see if people go for this, handout and understand if like, does this cause more inflation and use it as an easy ploy for buying votes? I don't know. But so I do want to touch on the topic of, does this cause more inflation?
Can we do the inflation part
Yeah,
first?
I want
Well,
to hear
you and
guys'
I were
thoughts.
going back and forth a little bit. in
So
Discord
the
on this,
inflation
yeah.
part, I think, is interesting. Let's just start there because we did a whole episode on inflation. 2 episodes ago, and where I came out was like that fiscal and monetary policy doesn't impact inflation as much as I thought it did. Like the money printing, the dishing of money wasn't exactly what was like really driving inflation. This form of fiscal policy might drive it a little harder because I think like this will directly get spent, right? So it's like the velocity of money will like immediately go to velocity of money as well. But I still, you guys basically convinced me 2 episodes ago that like this doesn't really impact inflation as
Well,
much.
I think there's an important distinction though, right? Because like fiscal and monetary sound like the same thing, but I think when I say monetary, I mean like quantitative easing, that type
Easing
of thing,
or like bank reserves or something like that.
Yeah, whereas fiscal is like, hey, we saw your business might be in trouble. Would you like $40,000? No strings attached, 0 interest, and you're like, okay.
Because of its impact on the velocity of money directly.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
and it's arguable that in the pandemic, right, we had this massive temporary demand destruction, and we did do fiscal, we did helicopter people money, but also there's some nuance there. There was demand destruction, there was a hole we had to fill, and also we, as far as I'm aware, we actually borrowed it from the Treasury, right? Versus like some of the MMT crowd would be like, you don't have to borrow it, you just send it into people's bank accounts. You don't issue any debt. It's the beauty of it. You just make that's like the true, like when people say helicopter money, right? They refer to the Milton Friedman old school where he was like, you literally print the money at the printing press. You don't borrow it. You literally.
I have the Milton Friedman quote on my
that was
screen.
the
I
thing.
just
It's
say
like
that. It's
literally
funny
just
enough.
print
Do it.
money, put it in duffel bags, and just dump it on people from helicopters.
Well, he
you know?
specifically says that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. I think
Yes.
I've kind of like gone away from that because we see that like supply and demand of goods has clearly influenced inflation, right? So the fact that the supply chain broke down and then we dumped money in people's bank accounts, demand went up, supply went down. Obviously, we have price increases. So I guess I get away from the whole monetary phenomenon because we've put money in banks before. We've done tons of quantitative easing, and that hasn't had an inflation impact.
Well, it went into assets,
Right.
right? There's a reason why, that's why this is so hard for people because there's so much nuance here. Like there has been kind of some inflation, but it's like
It's
when you
debasement more than inflation.
Yeah, when you do QE, it tends to go into stock prices, real estate prices, and that causes this whole other issue because obviously housing prices, rent, all this stuff, this is a huge component of the CPI print, right? So it does affect people. But I actually don't think we have gone into some sort of paradigm yet where we've actually been shipping people money and doing it in an era where there isn't like this massive demand destruction. So this California thing to me is interesting because it's like, canary in the coal mine. Like this isn't COVID right now. Like, yeah, we're kind of in a recession, but like COVID was like, oh my God, like we're going to do a deflationary death spiral, Great Depression. Like everything is like sky is falling, right? This is different. This is like, times are a little tough and I need to win an election. So here's some money. And it's not even like, here's some money to you, the neediest of the people. It's like, here's $300 to poor people and here's $200 to people making
He's
$500K
just
a
making
year.
sure everybody knows he's still here.
Yeah, and it's like this is different. Like this could be inflationary in a bad way if everybody starts kind of memeing this. Everybody in power starts being like,
What if I
print some
reframe
money.
this and I'll take the opposite of my own argument, where let's say inflation is not the topic of the times, and he says, California residents, we collected too much tax. I'm going to give you a tax rebate, and I'm just going to hand you back some of the money that we kind of over collected. So here's some money back, and I'm going to do it based on tiers on income. And if inflation isn't a topic of the times, does inflation even get brought up in that scenario? I don't know if it does. And so when you reframe it, it doesn't sound as bad. I still think it make the argument for buying votes and being obviously politically advantageous, but it doesn't sound as bad. And I don't think any of us would be like, oh my God, we're going to cause a massive inflation spike. Obviously, the context we present ourselves in today influences how we think about it. And I still think it's not good. It's kind of working against what we're trying to accomplish.
Directionally, it's not good.
Yeah, directionally, it's like in the opposite direction we want to go.
Can I throw something out there? And I'm curious what you think about it, because I actually am sympathetic to the sort of high level purported goals of this policy. Obviously, the execution is kind of what matters in the end, and it's executed terribly. But I do kind of feel like we are going to get in a situation where we do have to give certain people money to buy very specific things. Like if I was ruling the world as a benevolent dictator, I would be trying to effectively rectify some of this. Like we went through this period where we basically bloated asset prices. People who bought assets got really rich. People didn't participate in that. And then, oh, by the way, you can't buy a house, and also your gas is $7 a gallon right now. How do you fix that? You can't just snap your fingers and make gas $3 a gallon. You need to invest in supply, which we totally screwed up, and we can rectify that. But even if we do, it's still probably 7 years down the road to fix supply issues. So what do we do in the meantime? Do we just let people sit around and not buy gas? And we're like, sorry, Jerome's just like, we need some pain. We got to. I don't think so. I think you do actually have to send people money, specific people money. I'm kind of for that policy, and I actually don't think it would be that inflationary if done right. I'm curious if you think you have a better prescription for this.
Well, I mean, if people bought gas, like you said, they're not going to buy more gas. They're just going to buy enough gas what they need to do their normal things. If they pay rent, that's not going to be inflationary. So if you could actually be smart about how you direct the money, you could obviously have the money put in ways that's not going to be inflationary. If they go buy a new big screen TV or a new iPhone or, buy Bitcoin, obviously there's things that could be inflationary, but, there are also other ways you could accomplish that without giving people money. You could bolster food banks, food stamp programs. You could do earned income tax credits.
How do you fix gas?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I think it's really like putting a feather in the cap of a digital CBDC with stable coin smart contract that says you can literally spend it on these things.
yeah, you could say you can spend it on diapers, gasoline.
You can see why they want it, right? Because if we were the Fed and we had a CBDC, we'd be like, oh, this is easy mode. Here's
Fully
free
controlled.
money. It has to be spent here, and you can only spend up to X amount. Beyond that, you're probably doing something
and
weird.
it expires in 9
Talked about
months.
this.
Yeah, and you can see why that would be good and why people would want to do that who are in power. And now I feel like we're kind of getting into that kind of Russell Napier theory on how we're entering this era of very heavy financial controls, financial repression. There's going to be this very concerted effort to simultaneously print money to kind of even out this wealth divide while trying to figure out how to confiscate money from the top and fixing this kind of imbalance and letting people live their life, buy gas, buy food, not having society blow up, walking this tightrope somehow, which I'm skeptical is going to happen. I think this is a good kind of longer term or mid-term bull case, I think, for Bitcoin, right? Because I think Bitcoin's time to shine is the liquidity drain is over. We've kind of peaked in recession, and the governments are sitting around being like, oh God, we've got social unrest. Gas prices are still going to be high. This is the thing people have to understand. All the Fed can do is destroy demand, but it's temporary. The second they take their foot off the gas or the brake, right? There's no additional, like, it's kind of crazy, right? If you look at like the actual supply of oil, the production of oil, like Russian oil exports, it's the same.
Right.
It's the same that it was like a year ago, as far as I've seen. And it will continue to be the same, right? So once they're like, okay, we're done, prices just go back up, inflation goes back up, we're in the same spot because we don't have the supply, and it's like, what do we do? And it feels like what all the politicians are gonna do is they're gonna do the Gavin Newsom. They're gonna be like, all right, well, here's $500 just to pay for gas, and that's gonna be like, well, here's another $500, but it's just for your diapers. You're like, oh, well, here's another $1,000, but it's just to subsidize your rent. And like, where does it end, and how do you protect yourself against that if you are sort of like a person who's kind of in the middle high tier of, and you've got these assets but not a ton, you don't have like, you're
Can
not
we
Elon
pivot?
Musk.
Can we pivot to the other argument, like the buying votes?
Yeah.
The buying votes argument, and I think
course.
what I'm asking is like, what's the nuance here? Because I like my take when they first issued Stimmy checks to the populace, my thought was like, oh shit, like this is a slippery slope, and I thought like, I think right now we're kind of like shooting the messenger with Gavin here. Because the moment we issued Stimmy checks, I immediately thought, oh my God, this is now the path to get elected. Who's going to give me more? And like, here comes somebody giving you some more than the next guy. And then like the next guy after that will be like, well, I can give you more. And the next guy after that, and it's like, it just continues down this path. And like, if you're a interested actor, you're going to be like, well, yeah, who's going to give me the most? Like, because most people don't give a shit. Like, who's going to give me the most?
Nobody gives a shit.
It's gonna be like DAOs, right? Like, what do we do? Do we just do we reinvest or do we pay ourselves? Oh, 98 to 2. Oh, looks like we just cash out. Like,
Apparently, people like airdrops.
yeah, people are short-sighted, and rationally so, I would argue.
Do you guys remember when George W. Bush did helicopter money? I forget. I think it was after 2001.
Yeah, that was such a cute little thing in retrospect.
Right,
though.
and to your point, Eric, I remember I was like, I think I was in college or just out of college, and I got this check, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And he was like, don't let the terrorists win. Like, go out and shop and buy. Like, I think that was his literal message. Was like, don't let them win. Like, don't be scared, and still do things like you normally do. And I would have thought, like, looking back to that like. Politicians maybe have saw that as like, that was an interesting thing that politicians did. It maybe helps them in the long run. But I think this time around, I think politicians learn that when you do these stimulus checks, like, it can be advantageous for you politically. And it's just really tough for politicians to solve some long-term, ambiguous like problem. And it's so much easier to say, here's some money. Let's relieve your problem in the short term. Solving in the long run is not going to get me elected. So here's this option, and you can see right through it just by the execution and the framework of how they implemented this. So to me, it's pretty obvious.
Do you guys ever? I'm going to throw something kind of out of this world at you.
Oh boy,
I know, but it might be.
Take me
I
there.
think you'll.
you're
enjoy
really
it.
hyping it up. I hope it's good.
No, it's just like if you were like another species. I mean that's
you were
that's like literally
frog.
that's like literally a meme in itself. If you were another species looking at this planet,
Oh, like an alien species.
whatever you like,
Okay.
and you were the most level of you were in the macro where you were looking at this planet.
Completely unbiased.
You're unbiased. Let's just assume you're an alien.
Yeah.
You're an alien. You showed up in your spacecraft.
What else
that
would you be?
has broken the physics of the universe. You found your way here and you discovered a planet. And on that planet, there were these organisms that evolved to the point where they were sentient, which is what we discussed. What does that even look like last time? And they developed an information system of currency. First, it began through the form of barter. And they extracted raw materials and goods from the planet, things that they valued that met their needs and their wants and their desires. You want this, I want that. That created barter. And then they agreed on different levels of complexity in this system. And then once they agreed on the levels of complexity of what created monetary value, they said, okay, so now we're going to construct a system that works for this geographic area, which we'll call a country. And then that became, well, how does this geographic area that agrees that this is valuable to us conduct trade and barter with another geographic area, which we'll call another country? Arbitrary lines in the sand. And then we developed a global monetary system so that we could all, these monkeys, literally, which is what we are, evolved monkeys, barter and trade, and then create a system in which we could produce goods. There's supply, there's the demand of this of what we're producing in the first place, and being able to trade across these lines in the sand. If you were looking at that and you looked at the complexity of like what situation we've gotten into today, which is like what we just discussed for the last 20 minutes, what would you think? Is if you were to hit the reset button, for example, like how would you design a society and a monetary system, both domestically and globally, that worked for the people? Like this is when I hear and I sit in the nuance of the details of the economic machine and the monetary system, all I can really think about is everyone is discussing such incredibly nuanced details of the system as it exists today. And we're trying to make that system better. But I often ask myself, without that system imploding or needing to create some level of anarchy to explode the whole thing and start over, are we actually moving in the right direction in terms of like what would a productive financial system in which barter and production and supply and demand are necessary look like? Because to me, it's like we're lost in the details. I imagine a bunch of ants.
I would start by giving all the power to a couple of people, like Jerome Powell.
So this is the level of insanity. Like that's
Right.
one example of the level of insanity that I'm talking about.
Right.
It's nuts. It's
like backwards.
and we're waiting. We're like, what is going to happen on July 11th? Like that's the system we live in. Like it's absolutely mind-boggling to me.
It's
I don't
obviously
know.
crazy. It's also maybe better than the old system we had, right?
Yeah.
But maybe not good. I think if you could just fast forward to the end game, like what would you do? You would create some monetary system. Like the perfect thing would be like you have a benevolent dictator who is purely good and has everybody's interest at heart. And it's also like a freaking super gigabrain AI thing and it knows all the parameters. So I think the end system probably looks like that, except you figure
Why
out
would it
how
need
to
to
do
be a individual, benevolent dictator though? Like, could it be?
I'm just saying, like, if you envisioned, like, with knowing stuff that we know,
Yeah.
right? You could imagine.
They've
imagine
absorbed everything.
Some Jerome Powell-esque god of finance who's merged with the machines, and he's got like AI, and he knows all of the financial parameters. He only has the best interest of humanity at heart. He tweaks all the parameters so everything thrives. And he's a gigabrain, so he does it properly. They don't do the Fed thing where
And
they
then they don't
steer
get
the car
bogged
off
up in the
cliff,
they
you
don't
know?
get bogged up in the like the bipartisanship, like fighting each other. So that you have this like one guy making all the right choices
I get
unilaterally.
so
Yeah, of course.
frustrated by the political aspect of all this stuff. Like
You
it's
immediately
just-
zoom out.
I can't help it,
But you realize this is just like the struggle between like conservatism and like progressivism,
which
right?
is healthy.
Which is good. It's
I
this-
like that.
Neither is right or wrong, and it's
Totally.
that push and pull that's
Totally.
good, right? But like conservatism at its core is like humans are not good at this. They're not good at central planning. They have like these kind of like moral things that go awry in their head. It's best if we just take them out altogether. Free market. But then you kind of have like anarchy, and then you have the strong overpowering the weak. That's not great. But then if you go full progressivism, you get like the Fed. You're like, we can get 4 people in a room and they can just type in all the right numbers and then we'll have like financial abundance, right? And that obviously doesn't work either. But I think that's directionally correct, but we don't have the capability to do it yet as like a species, but it's directionally correct. So it's like a question of when do we venture out versus like when do we just go like, humans are bad at this, free market.
Is technology something that can help us achieve that optimal outcome, or
It does seem like someday, right? The idea that you had Jerome Powell just tweaking interest rates instead of like some machine learning algo that knew everything about all of the data and the universe and everything. It could make predictions. It will probably seem really dumb to a future
yeah.
generation that we just had some guy
Yeah.
with like a money printer meme.
But I have to argue against my own point in that whatever I think that technology is human at the end of the day. You know, we had this discussion as well, right, in our Discord, that we better be very mindful and conscious of how we're treating technology, the way we're speaking to it, the way we're shaping it. I mean, it is human in so many ways. Human beings are coding it. Like the parameters that we're setting are human. Like how this evolves is human.
I agree with you, but there are iterations along the path to this like end game, right?
Yes.
And like the iterations can be technologically advanced, right? So right now, the way we measure inflation is like so archaic. Like it's not actually based on price measurements. We actually like do interviews with like human beings and say like how is your business being impacted? Like it's so
Very rarely, right?
yeah, and it's like inaccurate, it's like inefficient, but like
And it lags, right?
it lags. Like, but if you like measured every transaction on a blockchain, for instance, you could see price changes immediately and accurately. So that's like an instance where technology could improve this right now.
Yeah, and I'm kind of on Eric's point. Like, I think the general framework is good when you're talking about the end result, but I think these iterations are necessary problems and bosses on the different levels you need to achieve in order to get to like a better place. Like, there's no way you just like implant a system and it works perfectly. You need these problems, and we need to work through them, and we need to have discussions about like why does this suck and what could make it better and what's the next iterative approach. And like you zoom out and I'm like, well, let's zoom in and figure out what's the next best thing, what's the next best iteration of this, because yeah, it may not work out in our lifetime, but maybe in a few more, you know, if they keep iterating in the right direction, you know, it'll eventually get there.
100%.
All right, so the future is a deep fake Jerome Powell.
That was partly why I wanted to go there.
Yeah.
I knew he was trying to segue there.
I wanted to just lubricate the conversation a little bit.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, just wet the whistle.
I think I'm ready.
Yeah. So, wow. Deep fake?
Yeah, take us home, beard.
Take us to the future.
I don't even know how to begin. I'm not ready to begin this, but I mean, why don't you tell the story about the Ukrainian situation? And I think that would be a really good like anecdote to like go into
it was just a little
what happened
snippet I
and
saw
then
on Twitter. I feel like it was the Germans. They thought they were talking on a video call to the Ukrainian
Prime
Kiev
Minister,
mayor.
right?
Was it Vitaly
Yeah.
Klitschko or whatever his name is, the fighter guy?
Klitschko,
Yeah.
maybe?
Klitschko. I don't know. Sorry, send your hate mail. And the call kind of got messed up at a point, and I guess the face altered, and they realized they were on a call with like not him. It was just it's like a TikTok filter basically, but you know, an advanced one. And that was kind of like a whoa, that's pretty crazy. Like, and we know this exists, right? We've seen many of us have seen like the Tom Cruise deepfake guy on TikTok, who for me is the most unsettling example of this I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's the
like
most, it's
perfect.
the best.
It's a perfect fake.
It's the best fake yet.
Yeah, I think
For a lot
mostly
of
because
people.
like he does the voice himself, right? I think.
Correct.
And his voice is really, he does a really good
So
Tom Cruise impression.
the
and his
actor-
face is like,
Was trying to succeed as an individual actor, and he kept running into this problem where people kept saying, "You're just Tom Cruise.
You're like a B
look
Tom Cruise."
You look like Tom Cruise."
wait, is that what happened to him?
Yeah,
I didn't
I
even
didn't know
realize he
that.
was an actor.
Oh yeah, this guy is a professional.
So he's like,
the
"Fuck it, I am
reason
Tom Cruise."
that the deep fake of Tom Cruise is so good is because the person who does it is so talented. And I wish I could say his name because I want to shout him out, but I don't remember it. So
It's
shout out deep
I
fake
think his
Tom
name is
Cruise.
just like deepfake
on
Tom
TikTok,
Cruise
it's
on
deep
TikTok.
It's
Tom
deep
Cruise.
fake Tom
Deep
Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
So this guy like literally decided a few years ago to go all in on just being Tom Cruise.
He's
But
got
it's using
millions of
technology. It's not just him looking
Exactly,
like him. It's not like a
he's doing what
doppelganger.
he needs to do. He's moving. He's making the facial expressions.
You're saying that
he's
if
using the
I
voice.
jumped in, it wouldn't look nearly as accurate.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close.
And your voice would be.
Well, I
not
don't
good.
look like Tom Cruise to you.
Next lifetime. So there are insane implications in this situation. Basically, what we have is a situation in which, to get right to the meat of it, reality is being questioned. Fucking cameras, man. Sorry, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Our fucking cameras keep turning off. It's our first time, though. So if you're with us on YouTube, yeah, this is just what's happening.
We'll figure this out.
We'll figure this out. We're
Have
still
a bunch
learning.
of smiley faces.
We have a situation in which technology is catching up to us to a degree in which reality is being questioned. We've developed a form of AI that is like actually to do again with neural networks related to our last conversation, where we've developed deep fakes of individuals, right? And so there's so much to explore within this, but the Tom Cruise example is just one example of so many where you can essentially recreate an individual and make people believe that it is 100% authentic to the point where people are not able to distinguish the truth from fiction. And the repercussions of that, I think, is the most interesting part of this.
Like, what are the
Conversation.
implications of this technology now existing?
Play it out just like we do with crypto or the markets, 18 months. What does this look like? 18 months, 18 years.
Right.
18 years. Have
Right.
you guys even 18 years imagine what this technology looks like?
Yeah, I mean, we should just go straight to 18 years, I think.
But then
Let's
we're
go to
talking about the
18
solution, because I think there's.
Do you think there's a solution?
Yeah, but let's talk about the implications first, because
Let's talk about the implications.
to me, it's essentially democratizing fraud, right? You can create fraud and you can democratize it, and not only will it be hands in the like nation states, it'll be hands of like us if we want to. I mean, look how good some of these Snapchat filters are. They're hilarious and they work really well. And imagine like open source technology that allows you to deep fake another person. You input, I don't know, a couple hours of video or audio of them, and then outputs like a filter. So this democratization will go everywhere. The most obvious way is like it could obviously tip elections. That's the like biggest threat I think about. It could tip elections. It could tip world decision makers in terms of like going to war.
send us into
or not.
war.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So that's like the worst case that comes to mind. But maybe there's a bunch of middle cases that like for the average person make life not so
Just
fun.
Screw over
Right.
people. Yeah, absolutely.
So just I think like let's go on the because people say like is this a threat to democracy? Can this affect our elections? Look at the last election. There was no deep fakes that like tipped the scale.
They got
right?
people on Facebook ads, man.
Exactly. That was the example I had written out. It's like if you could get people on Facebook ads and Russian interference, and think of the level of due diligence most people do. Zero. I saw it. I went to my barber. I told my barber about it. And now it's viral and everybody knows about it. Hillary said XYZ. But what if the original piece of content was just completely fraudulent in the first place? That entire person's like decision framework, which is based on it's not based on anything to do with like, well, Hillary's like this and like this and like this and like this across these different policies. No, most people don't think like that. They think, do I like her? Yes or no. Very binary. And then they go, what's her stance on abortion? Yes or no. Okay, I'm good. And then if a video comes out that says Hillary's fucking pro-life or pro-choice or whatever it is, done. It's gone. They're never going to. And then imagine the level of follow-up to prove to that person, no, actually what you saw was a deep fake video. Oh, really? Prove it to me. And then we enter this long, grand scheme of like, prove to me that the original video I saw was a deep fake, and it's gone. And where we land, nobody's going to know what reality is anymore.
Your point is that like the threshold to give in something of disinformation is a lot lower than a deep fake, and it already is happening. And so when you have this, it's far more convincing.
Yeah, we already have it with like meme images and like articles.
Totally.
Never mind like a video.
You don't even need to fake it. You could just meme it and
Right.
it'll
Yeah,
spread.
you can just write an article that's not true, and it already spreads like wildfire if it confirms people's kind of like preconceived notions about a particular thing. Like you can just imagine like any random Donald Trump deep fake video. People be like, I knew it. Share 100 million times. It's
Right.
out there, and then you can make endless ones of these. You could just flood the whole internet with so much fake content. You can't even parse out the real content anymore. And then we're going to have to get into this weird situation where like we just have to trust, like, do we come full circle and we're like, oh, we have to trust CNN. CNN put it out because otherwise, like,
So I
we
want to
can't
go.
trust a random account. That
I want to
It
go.
is-
I want
it
to go
is
back
that.
to that, but like I think where I land on this, like the first glance response is like this is maybe the most dangerous technology that I've seen in my entire life.
Yes.
Where like this could spiral things so far out of control because you can no longer trust what you see or hear, and that's like
I don't trust you right now.
well, this whole thing's a simulation. I'm a deep fake
That's where
of
I'm at
your
right now.
alter.
Like imagine being at that level though.
oh, there's
Where like
you can't trust anything.
If I can't trust that the video of Barack I saw is Barack, how can I trust you?
right. So I guess where
That's terrifying.
So I think like the near term, right? Because not the 18 years, but the 18 months. The near
Yes.
term is that industries are going to be sprouted based on this, right? There's going to be authenticator industries like Adobe and Adobe's like competitors have already started
Yes.
going down this path of being like, well, we can put a blue check on a video that is like not deep faked. And that's going to be a big, big industry. And I think like the other part of it is that these things are going to be banned. Like I think deep fakes are going to be illegal unless you like clearly label, hey, this is a deep fake. And I think that's already been implemented in places like China. I was like doing a little bit of research.
The problem is technology moves in two directions. So as quickly as the technology is getting better for deepfakes, the security and prevention and identification technology is also improving.
The creation
But
outpaces the
typically,
detection.
It outpaces on the
sure.
creation
Always.
side.
And I think like in TradFi, like a lot of people have been wondering, okay, so like cybersecurity is going to be like one of the biggest industries of our future lives. And I hadn't considered sort of like video authentication as part of that, but I actually think that's going to be like one of the biggest components of it.
We need a JPAL 200 basis points interest rate increase deep fake. And then we all trade around it. It'll
Yeah.
be great.
God, yeah,
Can you
just
imagine?
buy some options. Like that's going to happen.
That's going to
At
happen.
some-
Going to happen.
at some point. That's going to be an like incredible industry, right? Did you guys watch Silicon Valley, where he makes
I
the
loved
hot
it.
dog app, right? Hot dog, not a hot dog. It's kind of funny, right? But in the future, I feel like that's going to be like critical. Like as like a Facebook or a Twitter or something. Like if you can't figure out how to identify like a deepfake video in real time, like I feel like you're going to be opening yourself up to like crazy lawsuits. Like we're talking about politics and everything, right? But like think about you know who's going to use this stuff first and like in the meanest way possible is like 12-year-olds. They're gonna like make videos. They used to just be like, Becky, you have a big nose, but then like suddenly Becky's gonna be performing like weird sex acts with people, and they're gonna like release it, and it's gonna be like really
People
nasty.
thought
and,
cyberbullying was bad.
yeah, no, this is gonna take cyberbullying to some
No,
like
because the
ungodly,
biggest,
terrible level.
you might like this stat. 96% of deep fakes are porn.
No way.
Right.
96%.
Yeah,
Right.
so it makes sense that the first use of deepfakes in the cyberbullying realm is going to be like turning
It's
just like
Becky giving a blowjob.
yeah, and it's gonna be like some 11-year-old girl or something. And it's gonna be like terrible,
disgusting.
and it's gonna be this.
It's gonna be your
people are gonna
search
be like-
engine rankings for
People
the
are
next
gonna be like
20
yeah, they're
years.
gonna be like Facebook.
And
How
her
could
parents
you
are gonna
allow
wake up
this?
to
And
it.
it's
Yep.
gonna be a
Yep.
gonna be a disaster
She's gonna
unless
cry.
like somebody can create some really sick filtering technology that blocks
Facebook
this
is
stuff.
promoting the use of deepfakes because they want the data, because they want to supply the prevention and security side. The
But there-
more that we get it at the same time,
But there's
we
also
can-
an upside to it. Like, like Calcium Bagel in our Discord said, like, this is the next step to the metaverse where like you can literally sit down and talk to your dead grandmother because they're going to layer on her deep fake face onto, something that you want in the metaverse. And I actually think that that's like the real use case of this thing is like not criminally. I think it's actually
It can be
kind
used
of-
for positive.
It's going to be the way
the
forward.
real use case or the use case that you would hope
I actually think that's
Will
the
be
main use
dominant.
case. Like I do
mostly
think
positive.
Yeah, I think this is the way the metaverse goes. But I do see. I said I've never been more scared of technology in my life. I
Right.
see the downside, but I do think that this is there is an upside case here that is going to be sort of like the way forward.
Feels like opium. I think like I would like to think that's what it would be used for, but I can just see so many like incentives aligned by using this for bad means. And because we live in a pseudonymous culture and like, there are, pseudonymous Twitter handles that can post stuff and just like seed it into existence, for market making capabilities, for disinformation capabilities. I do think there is kind of like a crypto like angle to it, or maybe like a ledger angle to it, where you could potentially, and I don't know where privacy rolls in this, but you could potentially like require device manufacturers to publish metadata. For every NFT that's made or published online, it like is maybe the metadata is like recorded into an NFT, and this is the original use of that video. And there's some metadata published, and I don't know where the privacy plays in this. But, this is where like a public, authenticated ledger could come into place where you could go and verify that this is in fact the original video. Yeah. But to your point, it may not matter.
It doesn't matter.
It may not matter.
People seeing that will be enough to
correct.
Right. They won't do the due 90% diligence.
90% of people won't.
No, but I do think in cases of like national security or things like that, like it is important to have that like some kind of device.
That seems like an easy solvable problem.
Comes back to the platform.
Authentication.
Is the platform responsible? And then it comes back to this aspect of like who's the entity controlling like the news and dissemination of like whether something is real or not.
Right.
Like we had the disinformation board. We discussed that in one episode. Do we need a disinformation board to come out and say, actually, that was not verified by the blockchain, that video that you think of Obama doing X, Y, and Z or whatever it might be.
I saw another idea that was kind of this online. It was an authenticated alibi. So let's say you carry a device. Let's say it's your phone and there's an app on there, and it just privately, just for you, records your location, the time, where you are you on the phone, are you not on the phone, are you sleeping, whatever. It records all the data it could possibly manufacture. And if a deep fake comes out about you, you can then choose to publish a sliver of that authenticated alibi information and say, actually, I have this app that like confirms that I was not in that location. I was not in camera because I was actually like asleep from my sleep app. Or I don't know. You can see where this goes.
I get your point, and I think this goes back to Stevens. Like, so where do we get our information from now if we can't trust anything anymore? And like, CNN, New York Times, like these maybe become sort of the trusted news sources, and like we went through a whole Web 2 regime of being able to like talk to each other and like maybe get info from each other, but like if you can no longer trust any of that, I think it reverts back to sort of centralized, top down. This is trusted.
This is the new world. I think like democracy has to be resilient. And like we just have to realize that we live in a world of lies now, and like this is the facts on the ground, and we have to figure out how democracy can be
like other
resilient,
way around.
because there's no way to avoid the lies, right?
It's got to come down to the individual.
Yeah, but you can't. You already said
the
individual can't
give me the
do
tools.
it themselves.
Give me the tools.
Like,
give me the location identifier.
Do you see a way out of it with the tool? Because like I said, like the girl in middle school is not going to have her face saved because she can authenticate that she was actually in this position, and that's not really her in the video. Like that's going to like ring pretty hollow for the people who are getting bullied with these things, for sure. I think it makes sense for political stuff, but that doesn't seem like a hard problem to me. The hard problem to me is just the mass proliferation of everything.
That's a good point. This is something that I brought up yesterday when we were grabbing drinks after playing tennis. It's like the fact that the four of us are on camera at all times now, we can be plugged into the GAN and we can be deepfaked. But Becky, the 11-year-old, can't be GAN'd because she doesn't have enough data available for the machine learning to actually capture her face.
I think she's just gonna need like one photo or like one little video.
Dude, I saw
in the future at some point.
So
and it'll be
on Vice. They interviewed the guy who's behind Deep Tom Cruise. It's like this Eastern European guy, and he said he's like, I have millions of data inputs on Tom Cruise. Obviously, like there's so many. He's like, I have every facial expression he's ever made plugged into this GAN. And it's getting better and better because the GAN, but like Becky, the 11-year-old, is not going to have that much input.
But it won't matter in 10 years.
Maybe
It'll just be like how computers used to take up an entire room and cost $60 million, and now they're in your phone and it's super powerful. Like it'll just like these
It'll just
algos will
render.
they'll be able to like kind of fill in the lines from all the other data, and they'll be like, oh, I don't need data on that because these faces did this.
Here's
and
how a
then-
face moves.
Yeah, and it'll
Right.
just be able to generalize in like a scary kind of crazy way, and it'll just boom, it'll look super realistic.
Are we gonna have to teach? Last episode we talked about teaching, about money,
Financial literacy.
financial literacy in school. Are we gonna have to teach?
Sort of like,
I don't know what the topic would be called, but like how to understand what's true and not. Like
Right.
what is
I feel
real
like kids
information?
already know that because they live in this world where
Maybe
like,
they're better at it
everything
than
is,
we are.
Well, it's
Yeah,
weird
who's gonna
because
teach
they
them?
know
Old people?
they know everything is filtered online, and the filters are getting crazier now. Before, a filter was like some lighting thing on a still photo,
Right.
But now it's at the point where you can film an entire video of yourself and just look like a supermodel or look like a literal clown in clown face or anything you want. Right? You look like a freaking hippopotamus, like the
Big fan of the crying face on Snapchat, by the way. It's
yeah,
hilarious.
that thing is like- it's crazy. So it's weird because the kids these days sound like freaking
Yeah,
absolute
you do.
boomer now.
You're old.
Sure do.
But they know these things. They know it, right? They know it up here, but yet they're still drawn into it. They still do feel ugly. They still feel bullied. They still feel disconnected. So there's like a part of us that sees that as real and like feels it, even though a part of our brain also knows it's not. It still does affect us, and I worry that effect's going to get worse and worse and worse as like these things get more and more and more real. And because like we were saying earlier, at some point it might be not us like looking into a phone. We might be literally in a physical space at some point, feeling as though it's like real life and seeing things and experiencing that. So like imagine like the equivalent of like Instagram filters, except you're just like living it in the metaverse. But maybe like that's the solution is everybody, it's just like an arms race where everybody gets the nukes and everybody is like has all of the filters
Right.
and everybody just lives in this fantasy like kind of perfect self. Like I don't know, but I don't know where it ends, but it just seems like it's gonna get pretty crazy.
Next bull run, all I know is next bull run, I'm going to long the shit out of these like authenticator
Yeah.
roles.
Or you're going to
it's-
create a deep fake to long your most
You should
reflexive
just become
token.
crypto Tom Cruise.
I'm going to turn myself into you guys and just do whatever
I think
you guys do.
last election, very interesting. There was interference, obviously. Everyone looks at that differently. But in this next election, I do think that like debating what is true is going to be the highlight of the conversation more than ever before. Not just like, was that video, what was that quote true? What's the source of that conspiracy? But like,
Right. It's already
I think
going
deep
that-
fakes
it's already
will
going that
play
path.
a role.
We're so screwed.
But by the way, in the last election, there were Biden deep fakes of
Yeah.
him like falling asleep and like,
No, that's a good point. Like you could just make that. Like obviously, he fell off the bike. Wasn't a great look. Like a week
was
ago.
that a deep fake?
No, but you could just make it like
See, like,
slightly
I don't
more,
know.
just
I really
slightly
don't
more
know.
pathetic.
Well, did you
right?
see
and
Nancy-
it'll go hyper viral.
But what I mean is like Biden fell off the bike. I didn't do any more due diligence than that.
Right.
I saw it on Instagram
Yes.
Reels.
But you saw,
Who
did you
the
guys
fuck
see?
knows?
Did you guys see Pelosi slurring her speech?
Oh, that
was
was
most
most
of
that
those
up.
are
That's
fake.
the best example.
That was a deep
Most
fake.
of those are fake.
No, that was like a clear deep fake, and they like debunked it, and they just slowed her voice down 5%. She sounded
I
drunk.
gotta go to work and I gotta move on to the next thing. I
Right.
would have moved on and said,
If
boom.
if
that's
from the
fake.
start
That's
you
real.
knew that was fake, and the logical part of your brain said, "I know this is fake," but then you watch it and we're like, "Nah, I wouldn't put it by her."
Why would you
Right.
initially say that that's fake?
Well, maybe
in the
you
first
knew.
Place?
Maybe someone said this
Maybe there's
is
a blue
deep
check
fake.
mark on
Yeah,
it.
it has a check mark saying it's a deep fake, but you still watch it.
yeah, if you don't like Pelosi, you really want it to to be real. Like,
Right.
Right.
people like really want to.
and the fact that
confirm
you've
their
seen
priors.
it,
They
it's
just
like it gets
really want
into
it to be
your
real.
like subconscious almost. Like you've seen it.
Yeah, but
It's
not
like- it's like
believing
bag
the
bias,
checks is
you
a
know?
part of becomes a part of my identity as well. It's like I'm not. What Facebook tells me that's truth? No way.
There's
Comes
no way
back
out.
to the individual.
There's no way out of this.
I mean, when it comes to elections, actually, Stephen and I, in New York, we happened to have drinks and dinner with someone who is an advisor to CISA, which is a cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency. They help with election security, and they're mostly around like infrastructure and elections and across the country. But I mean, he was just giving us some like off the cuff examples of how they're not prepared for even basic things like physical attacks on on election centers, and they are no way prepared to handle disinformation on this level
Right.
in elections, let alone like we're talking about, federal elections, not even like state level or local level elections. They're
Creation
not
is like
prepared.
10x past like prevention
Ugh.
in every way. And it's not just politics, blackmail, art, acting, and crime. There's this example of like apparently like people with like criminal background, like crooks, are getting jobs remotely where they never actually have to show up, like using deep fakes.
Oh, developers do that all the time. Like, I mean, every developer I've interviewed is like, I only work remote now. I'm like, yeah, because you're working 3 jobs at the same time at home. You're basically defaking it.
I mean, people were posting about like the North Koreans doing that on Twitter. I remember that. They were like,
Great
there's
developers, by
some
the way.
whole like army of North Koreans trying to like infiltrate like all of these companies and everything. Like that John Woo, I remember, like that's like that Twitter handle. He posted a whole detailed interview of him where he's like, I think I just interviewed a North Korean spy, and like and people were like initially like, that's not, no man, you're just being weird. And then somebody else later was like, yeah, this is actually a thing that's happening. They're trying to infiltrate, and it's just going to get easier and easier and easier if they can just look like you and talk like you and look like you. And just, that's
and Upwork, they do it all the time. I mean, they use an American sounding name, and their IP address, like, suspiciously is in China, but very close to the North Korean border. And they're obviously like, trying to collect money and get information and whatnot.
Yeah.
These are not like citizens, right? Those people.
I mean, I don't know.
These
They
are
collect money on Upwork, but I don't think like I don't know. They're probably not North Korean citizens. I don't know how they're
Okay.
going to pull the money out of
Yeah.
Upwork into like a North Korean
like a
bank
bank
account.
account.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
how that works.
Yeah. So you guys know how you guys ever heard the phrase like The Matrix was a documentary?
Sure.
Yeah.
I actually haven't heard that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Well,
do they-
it was.
Yeah. It's meant to highlight like our future, right? And we're really where we're going, and the fact that like we're going to exist in this other realm and become these like meat bodies that are plugged into this other. Okay, so we'll leave the matrix aside. What the deep fake sort of technology revolution makes me think about is Inception, if you guys have seen that.
Yes.
I think Inception was a documentary in so many ways, more than The Matrix. One of the things that there's 2 things that tie into that. One is deep fakes, and the other is simulation theory. With simulation theory, you're questioning your base level of reality. With deep fakes, I'm questioning if I'm looking at Eric right now or I'm looking at a deep fake of Eric. And really, at the end of the day, I think if you extrapolate that and you really play it out, the 18-year scenario, sure, it's only in the digital sense, and someone has to play that character, and I need AI to like basically take on the parts of Eric that have already been documented to make me believe that this is Eric. But like simulation theory proposes that this entire everything that I'm looking at is a complete mirage. And where I land with that is like, I think the biggest struggle of our lifetime, something that nobody wants to think about that I often tease, is we're not going to have any idea whatsoever what reality is.
Right. And where I personally land is like, I'm getting firmer and firmer in my belief that we're already in the mirage. And that's a scary thing.
I know, man. I know.
Well, like you're saying, it's like it's kind of scary how little information our brain sort of parses. Like when I look at your face and I'm like, that's Armand. I'm not touching you. I don't know. I can't see that you're like a 2D cutout. Like I'm taking like my brain's taking a couple data points on your face and a couple way things move, and it's just like, yep, that's Armand. That's it. Like it's we really overestimate like how much information our brains like actually process to like define what reality is, and I feel like it's like actually really terrifyingly easy to short circuit it.
Right. It's like a failure point.
Steve and I were talking about this separately. It's like, I think we're both pretty terrified by the idea of like how this plays out, this whole deep fake technology, to the point where like, if human beings really don't know anymore what's real and what's not, where does that land an individual? Like in their baseline reality understanding of what it like, how to even operate. Like, don't they lose their complete operating system? Like, where you'd be terrified.
Imagine where you lose it entirely. Like, imagine a video game where you can like change your skin on a whim. Imagine you can like change your face on a whim, and maybe that's the way it goes, where it's like you actually stop using that as the filter. Like, you stop using your sensory perception to determine reality because you no longer can.
You can't. But and I think most people would just sit around going like, well, I have to create a new meaning for myself.
It'd be like you'd base it on like a soul-bound username.
Yeah.
Like you'd base it on something like what Nick was saying. Like, it's something on the blockchain. It's something like this user said this. It wouldn't be like this bearded guy said this.
Right. So when you say there's a possibility that you're already in one, how do you arrive at that? Because I think that's the most interesting.
Well, I think it's
like-
another conversation for another day.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
I know you really want to have the simulation
No, that's
theory
fine.
one.
That's
but
fine. And
I think the fact that
we should.
Eric has played SimCity,
Oh my god!
For my entire life.
Yeah, to his entire life
I
is like
played a lot of Sim. I played
a
SimCity,
great precursor to
Sim
a future
Farm,
episode. Yeah.
Sim Ant,
Oh God! All right.
Sim Golf. Love Sim Golf. Actually, I played a lot of Sims now that I think about it.
Maybe we're playing one right now. That's the point.
I worry about it a lot. I think it's going to be like the. I mean, you said it beautifully. Like, the most important, terrifying thing that occurs technologically, and how we deal with that is going to be, wow.
And it's not because the magnitude is big, but the fact that like any human being can access the magnitude of the effect of this tool is crazy. Because like there's only like 13 people that can launch a nuclear missile, but like when you give 6 billion to people to convince 13 people that they need to launch one is where it comes a little freaky.
Good point.
Do you think that aliens, like 10,000 years from now, when they look back on us, like they're going to look at us talking about deepfakes and like, oh my God, this is going to ruin the world? Do you think they just rewind like 3,000 years earlier, like when humans invented fire, and they were all like, if they had roadcasters and headphones, they're sitting around being like, I can't believe we've just unleashed this like destructive
we found fire.
power.
Fire's
for,
gonna
like,
kill the
any
world.
human to just incinerate anything on the planet. Like, what is going to happen to this? But to us now, it's just like, oh yeah, fire. We have like a lighter.
I think they're just gonna be impressed with the food.
Will it just be like moot in the future? Are we like super overthinking things and it's just all going to be fine?
Like
I think
French
that's
fries.
That's my
Amazing.
takeaway, is that it's going to be mostly used for benevolent reasons. Like, it's going to create French fries more than it's going to create anarchy.
So we're all just like old man yells at cloud right now.
Well, I obviously see the downside.
Why do you believe that?
I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
I don't know, but like, optimism usually wins.
Optimism.
That's true.
Optimism.
Can't argue with that.
Well, optimism is inherently has action incorporated. There is an idea, but I worry about the level of pessimism that perpetuates society. Like, I worry about shows being created like Black Mirror, because on the one hand they stand for here's what not to do, but on the other hand they're a feedback loop of what to do.
Here's a blueprint for
Correct.
the evildoers.
And most people put their creative energy toward what not to do and what dystopia looks like. When was the last time you guys watched a movie about like some sort of utopia? Nobody watches one because they don't exist.
Yeah,
Right.
pretty boring. Yeah.
They're boring. And also because most people believe that utopia is inherently boring because there's nothing to do. That's why Kevin Kelly calls it protopia. Like, there's progress and it's mostly positive, but it's not this like perfection and then you're done, because done is stagnant and there's nothing to do. But like, dystopia hits at that like fear center of the brain, and people are intrigued by that. And what I worry about as an optimist is that most people are putting their creative energy toward all the dystopian worlds that we might live in. And this goes back to the beginning of like making art and movies and film. Like, I think it's really, I try to personally stay away from like taking in too much of that type of stuff.
I thought Avatar was the most utopian film that I've ever seen. It
There
like
you
had
go.
an impact on me. I was like, whoa, I could see how they like integrated biology into how things work, and like it is seemed like seamless. And if you played out like 1,000 simulations over 10,000 years, like things might develop in this way, and it'd be nice.
Did anybody else root for the military guys in Avatar, or was that?
Did you?
Did you?
What the fuck? I mean,
That's
listen,
like
if
a
he would have been
meme, you're
successful,
right. Yeah,
like
that's like-
pure 100,000.
He has to take the counter
return.
trade.
Like,
He always has to do the counter trade.
This is a feel-good movie, right? Who's the villain?
the military guy had a positive EV on invading the planet. Like it was purely a positive expected value.
Kind of like a Thanos thing going on, you know? You're like, I kind of get it.
All right.
All right, so
man.
main takeaway is it's going to be okay. But we should eyes open.
I don't know. Do you think it's going to be okay?
It's gonna be okay, but
I think it's
bumpy.
gonna be okay.
Bumpy
Big
along
bumpy
the
ride.
road.
I am bullish on humanity. In spite of, I'm like Rick.
I was
where
born
in
bullish
spite of
on
all
humanity.
the bear porn charts I post, I am fundamentally long-term bullish on the world.
I think not being is like, why are you even participating in society? Like, it's hard to.
It's a valid question.
Yeah.
Why even be here if you're
Why
not gonna
be
an
here?
optimist?
And sadly, that's where a lot of people land. Like, they're like, I don't see the point. And that's
I
sad.
get it as an occasional short-term pessimist, but
So let's be bullish on humanity. But I really believe what it comes down to more than anything is not where the technology is, but it's where our minds are, where we focus our attention, where we focus our energy, what we consume, and what we build. Because what we believe creates what we say on this podcast. What we say creates what we build, what we vote, what we do. And then that shapes the future more than anything.
Well said.
Good one.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen.
This is great.
I'm
Hell of
hungry.
an episode.
See you guys next time. Did our cameras even work?
No, it's fine. Whatever.
Peace. Love you guys.
Love
See
you guys. Thank you.